Hello, this is Rheisen from the After School Code Web Design and Development tutorial series, and in this tutorial we're going to learn a lot about CSS. So, the first thing we're going to want to do, oh snap, my folders are out of order. The first thing we want to do is create a new folder, get the index.html up and running, and we're going to start working with CSS. So, the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to create a new folder inside of our first folder. And we're going to want to call this folder CSS. And inside of this folder, we're going to add in our CSS file. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to open this with Notepad++. And here we are. So this has already been set up with our base with the doc type, HTML and /HTML, head along with the title, and the body. So in order for us to add CSS to our web page, we can do it a lot of different ways. The first way to do it is inside of the head to add these style tags, and then inside of these tags we could add code for scripting for CSS. But this is not the most efficient way to do it, and it's not the recommended way to do it. The better way to do it is to have an external CSS style sheet. And what that means basically is to have a new text document. So we're going to go ahead and create a new text document, and we're going to save this as style.css. There's the CSS extension inside the CSS folder, and this would be an external style sheet. And the reason we do this is just for organization. A big element of web design is organization and best practices. And so creating an external style sheet is considered a best practice. So now we can see in our CSS folder we've got style.css. Now that we have our style.css, we're going to need something to style it off of. So inside of our body, we're going to create an h2 tag. You can say, I want to be green. Alright, let's Control S to save our index.html. Now let's go over to style.css and add our first line of CSS code, or script. So we're going to say h2, so the element name, we're going to do open curly bracket and close curly bracket. Let's hit enter, enter. Just give ourselves some nice space right here. Now I'm going to hit the tab button, which you don't really need to do. It's also just like a preference thing. So inside this h2 we can say color green. And notice this color, colon, what color do we want? We want the color to be green, and then a semicolon. And now we hit Control S. Now, let's just see what happens when you run the CSS file in Chrome. We get the text. So, just for future reference, never run the CSS file, always run the HTML file. So when we run this in Chrome, we get the I want to be green, but it's not green. Now, what happened is, why isn't this green, is because we haven't connected our index.html to the CSS. This has no way of knowing if there's even a style sheet in here. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add a tag in the head called a link tag. And the link tag has three main attributes. The first one is called rel, and we're going to set that equal to style sheet. So what are we adding? A style sheet. What type? Which is the second attribute, a text/CSS style sheet. And where is it located? Just like for A tags, we use the href attribute. Now we're going to say it's located in the CSS folder, and it's called style.css. And now we can just close this off like that, like we do for images. So we can hit Control S, and now when we go back to our web page and we refresh this, we can see it's green. Now we can't really see it too well, so let's do something. Let's add some more styles. So let's add a style for the entire body. So as we know, the body is the entire web page. This is all that we see, and so a good way of showing that is by giving this a background color. And so that's background dash color, and then a colon. And we can say yellow, and then give this a semicolon to say we're done. So Control S, make sure you've saved your index.html, and now let's go back and refresh this. Now we see our entire screen has turned yellow. And we now see that the text really is green. Now, let's go back, let's add a few more headers. So we have that header, I'm going to say I want to be green also, and let's add another H2 and say I want to be blue. How are we going to make this one blue? These two right here, or all of these are all H2, and the only way we know how, the only way we can add a color is if we use this H2 element. Well, that's not true. What we can do is give this a class, and the class attribute is basically saying this H2 can be modified by the class. So let's give it a class of blue. And so what we're saying here is that we're pretty much naming this element blue. And so in our CSS document, we can say .blue, and then what the period stands for, this period stands for class. It's just saying get the element with a class of blue, right? Element with a class of blue. And we're also going to still do those curly brackets. We're going to say color blue and Control Save. And let's go back to the index.html, make sure it's all saved, and go ahead and run it. And now we have these two that are green, and this one is blue. So that's classes are extremely important, right? Because we can give each of these a class of a different color. So we can just say this one's red, and now we Control S, and now we go back over here, we can say the red one and make that red. Alright, Control S. And now we go back and refresh this, and now this one's red. Pretty cool. So CSS is often used for colors, paddings and margins, which we'll get into next. We basically use it for the layout of the site. I typically think that the HTML is just like the bare bones, very simple stuff, and the CSS is where you really get into web design. So CSS is super exciting, and let's just go over one more time how we did this. So first, we linked our CSS style sheet with this tag in the head, with the link tag. We said, what are we using? We're using a style sheet. What type of style sheet? Text/CSS. And then where can we find it? In this folder. So, and then in our CSS folder, we set the body with these opening and closing curly brackets to have a background color of yellow. And then we set the H2 to have a color of green, the class that's blue to have a color of blue, and the class that's red to have a color of red. So this is a very simple introduction to CSS. As you can see, we've got 3 different colors, the yellow background. Everything looks pretty good. Now, before we go, I want to introduce one more tag in HTML, and then one more style. Or we're going to add one more style. So we're going to add a div, right? And what the div tag is kind of like the body tag. We use divs just to kind of group things together. So if you have a header for your website, you kind of put it in a div just so that you can section stuff out. So let's go ahead and add some style for this div. So we can just call it by its element name since it's only one of them. We can just say background color, and we give it a background color of white. And so now if we go back and we refresh this, we see that this div pretty much circles all of our header tags, and then our body surrounds our div. So that's just a quick introduction to how divs work. Divs are extremely important. Now, although this looks really ugly right now, we can quickly make this an incredible, really cool site. So this is just a quick introduction to CSS just to get you guys thinking about adding styles, divs. As I said before, divs are extremely important. And really, the important thing is this right here. Linking to an external style sheet. This is probably one of the most complex tags you have, except for maybe the meta tags, which we haven't talked about yet. But this is probably the most important tag to have a good understanding of. So just take a little bit, really get to know this. And CSS styles are all really simple. They're pretty self-explanatory, nothing too difficult. So next tutorial, we're really going to dive into CSS, and we're really going to start making like an actual web page. So I'll see you guys next tutorial where we're going to make a web page that's going to be pretty cool. We're going to use links. We're going to use images. We're going to change the height and width of stuff, and we're going to talk about paddings and margins. So this is Rheisen from After School Code, and I'll be seeing you guys next tutorial.